In this video, we're going to make a couple of different full-blown multi-sampled instruments. The first example is going to be with a hardware synthesizer. So we're going to resample our hardware synth to make a multi-sampled instrument. And then we're going to use some free samples that are available online. So this is the patch. We have everything set up the way it should be. This is my base station, and this is going to be the patch that we're going to resample. So once you know the sound that you want to use, you need to figure out the key range that you want to resample. And we are going to do one sample per note hit. And I think I'm going to do it up a 2-octave range. So I'm going to just go down. I'm going to keep playing lower and lower on my keyboard until it gets to a point where I feel like, okay, this isn't really usable anymore. So around there, which is an A. So we're going to go from that A, and I'm going to start on, here we go. All right, we have A1. And I'm just going to drag this out. I'm going to make it relatively long. In fact, for simplicity's sake, I'll take it all the way over. And now with my pen tool, I'm just going to keep drawing in. We can make this as slightly bigger just to make our life a little bit easier. We're just going to keep drawing this in up 1 octave. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to go and I'm going to just duplicate these guys and do that. And now I need to just nudge them all over one position, and that should take us up 2 octaves. Now, what I've done is I've actually brought the BPM way down, and the reason for that is I'm going to be able to lengthen these samples, so they will be long enough. So right now when we listen to it, that's how long each of our samples is going to be, which should make my life easy, especially when it comes to looping and that sort of a thing. So now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to select all of them and bring it a little bit shorter just to make sure that we have silence in between each of these hits. So let's listen. And that should work fine. If we want to be safe, we could also actually put a gate on our chain, but I'm not too concerned with that for right now. That's definitely long enough. I'll just go ahead and bring it, make it even a little shorter. Yep, I'm good with that. Okay, and now the next thing that we're gonna have to do is we actually are gonna have to bounce this out, and we're gonna have to do that in real time because this is a hardware instrument. Okay, so obviously with a hardware instrument, it has to actually trigger it off the keys. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to actually bring this back 1 just to make sure we get that first one without any issues. And then I will right click, and I'm going to choose to bounce. And now I'm going to want to do this bounce in real time. 24-bit is fine. Pre-fader is fine. And let's go ahead and click OK. I will pause the video and come back once this has fully been captured. Okay, so a few minutes later, and we're left with this long audio clip that should hold every single one of these notes. And I'm just gonna trust that it's captured everything correctly. So now what we need to do is get these ready for the sampler. And the way I'm gonna do that is by starting with a quick little like slicing. So we're gonna go in here, we're going to slice this in place, and we're gonna choose it to do it on the bars. Okay, so you can now see on each bar, we don't need that last one. Now, so that I can set up loops a little bit easier and do it all in one go, I'm gonna select all of these guys and I'm just gonna bring them in like so. All right, so this should still be long enough for us. If you wanted to be super safe, what you would do is probably have these for almost like double the time. Like I just don't want to see like that release envelope kicking in. But if you sampled these and you did this at a much like slower time, or you had a longer sound, that would be one way to guarantee that you're not going to get any clicking or popping if you do need to loop and sustain. Hopefully we'll be all right. We'll try to get as good as we can. But from here, I'm going to go ahead and auto fade these guys just to get rid of any clicks or pops at the starter end of the loop, the samples. And now we'll go in and we're going to grab a sampler. We're going to create a new multi-sample, and now I'm going to select all of these from left to right, and that will bring them in this order. So I'm now going to drag it. I'm going to put them on, and we're starting, I believe, at like A1, which is here. Very important that you know that. And now we're going to go ahead and slice this to the multi-sampler. And what I want to make sure I do is turn the real time off again so that this is going to go a lot faster. Slicing at bars is fine. And we'll click OK. And we now have brought these guys in like so. And now when we listen, we are key tracking. Let's imagine that I want to extend the range of this. Obviously, I don't have the samples to do it, but that would be when I would turn key tracking on. So if I want to take this down and be allowed to play all the way down to, say, C1, or bring this up to C4, I could do that, but I have to make sure that I set up my key tracking and root key correctly. So let's go down an octave. So right now it's always just playing that A1. So I need to go in here and turn the key tracking on and set the root to be A1. Again, it doesn't sound particularly nice in that range, but that would be a way to extend the instrument. And do the same thing up here. Set this root to be A3. Key track it up. And now when we play up, we are still key tracking up like so. Okay, for everybody else, they're just fine. They're well and good. All right, so now the last thing I'm going to do is I am going to create a little bit of a loop just in case there's a long sustain passage. One of the hard things, though, can be to get this so it's just right and that we don't get any clicks or pops. So we are going to select everything here, and we're going to turn on looping. Okay, we're going to turn it on right there. This is doing it for all 25 of these zones, and we're going to have our loop start be a little bit in. And then we can bring our loop end back a little bit. And let's just listen and hear if we have any clicks or pops. A little bit of a click. So let's add a little crossfade in. And one of the tricky parts is they all are already on snap to zero crossing by default, but it doesn't automatically snap to the start or finish of like the duty cycle. All right, so that can be where it's a little bit tricky. So I'm gonna just bring this back in a little bit and see if we can get rid of that. Or we can try messing with the crossfade a little bit more. Okay, that's not too bad. It's audible, but it's not the end of the world. And then let's just test it out for a couple other notes. Awesome, that works for me. And now, of course, we have the ability to do stuff like add in the filters, shape the ADSR a little bit. And then when we click on the sampler, we'll be able to turn on the voice stacking, or whether or not we want this to be able to be like monophonic voiced or polyphonic voiced. Either multiple voices can play at once or only one. So right now we could play chords. But this is a bass sound and would typically probably be mono. So we're gonna just put that on like so. And there's a little bit of a click happening at the beginning. So that kind of eliminates that. And there you have it. There is our multi-sampled hardware instrument. So now we have a couple things we can do. So the first thing we could do is just save this as a preset. All right, so I'm going to right click. I'm going to choose Save Preset to Library. And we're just gonna call this Bass Station Bass, something like that. And we can add a category to it. It is a bass. And yeah, that's good for me. Click OK. And I actually have already done this once before, so let's call it Bass Station Bass 2. All right, good to go there. And then the other thing we're gonna do is we're gonna save this as a multi-sample. And by saving it as a multi-sample, you can then share it with whoever. Anybody who has a Bitwig sampler, they could take the multi-sample, drag and drop it in. They don't need the project or anything like that. So if we go up here, we have the ability to now save the multi-sample. And let's call this BassBot. Uh-oh, things are going crazy. Let's try that again. Let's call it BassBot. And category again will be bass. We could add tags to this if we wanted to. Description, I'm gonna write from the bass station. And then we will click OK. and that then creates the multi-sample, and we could then track this down in both our preset, and also we could track it down in the multi-samples, okay? By default, it's going to save it into your library here. Same thing with the preset. If you want to know then where you could get it to then share it with people, just right-click in here and choose Reveal File. And then you can see that it gets brought up like so in the multi-samples. And now you could save your multi-sample instrument with anybody on the web or anybody who has Bitwig Studio. Now we're looking at a big sample library from Principal Pleasure Studios. And it's a bunch of different synth presets that have been resampled. So our goal is going to be to take all of these alpha Juno patches, these first three, put them into one sampler instrument. Now for the lead and for the bass, they have these different layers, these different levels. Okay, and I think it has to do with the filter modulation. Let's listen to H10, and then let's see if we can listen to L10. Let's see if we can find that on here somewhere, or M10, whatever. Okay, we can hear that like so. So I think it just is a difference in not necessarily velocity, unless velocity is routed to the depth of the modulation envelope on the filter. But essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to layer those by velocity. And then in order to get to our different presets, we are going to use the select. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm gonna have to do though is I'm gonna have to pause the video, and I'm gonna have to go into each of these folders and rename some of these samples. So I need to rename these 01, 02, 03, 04, because I can't figure out any other way to sort it. And the issue is if I go and I drag and I try to bring these in, okay, it is going to put them in that order. And while I could go and manually pull out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's just going to take way longer than it would be if I could just go in and I can rename them and get them so that they index correctly here inside of Bitwig's, what do they call this thing in Bitwig? The browser panel. All right, let's do that. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've renamed everything. Now the next question that we have is, what is our root key? So if I'm looking at 01, is this a C, is it a D, is it an E, is it an F, whatever, something in between? And there's a lot of ways to determine that. We've kind of talked about some of them. One nice technique to use, especially on a sound like this, is to go up an octave. So we know that there's 12 keys in an octave, so 01 would be number 1. The next octave would start at 13, is to drag this in. And we're going to put this into raw mode again, just so we don't get any artifacts. And let's see what's this at, -6, that's good. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab a span. And the reason I'm using the span and not using the Bitwig oscilloscope is just because I think this one's a little easier to visualize. So I'm going to hit it, I'm going to hold it, and now let's go and let's take a look and see what we got. All right, so this is showing me a C. Odds are this is a C. All right, and if that first overtone is another C, we are starting in C. That is the note that is being played. And so we're going to now assume that for each of these sounds that's coming in, that the first one is on a C. One of the other big giveaways for us looking at this is that there's 49 in total. And if you look at your MIDI keyboard, you probably have a 49 key keyboard, very common. That starts with a C. So that was kind of my other dead giveaway. So now what I'm gonna do, we're gonna create a new multi-sample. We're gonna go from 1, we're gonna go up to 49. And we are going to start this on, I'm gonna start on C1. All right, if you drag up, you're gonna increase the range. If you drag down, you decrease the range. And so I just want this spreading across the keyboard like so. I release it. And again, I'm just gonna bring down that velocity range just so it's easier for you guys to hear. And we'll see that when we click on each of these, that it actually has gone in and correctly key tracked those guys like so. Hopefully you guys can see if I zoom in here a little bit, you can see those numbers. You might just want to double check that just to be certain. All right, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to group these. So for each of these patches, we're going to create a group. And then for the individual ones here, we're going to create some velocity layers. And then I'm going to show you guys how you can kind of select and go between them. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to group these, and let's call this group the Juno bass. Okay. Nice and good, nice and clean. The other thing I want to do is just go ahead and set the velocity range on this now so I don't get confused moving forward. So let's just bring this up and let's put it at approximately 80. Okay, that's where we're going to go with that. All right, so I don't know exactly what 127 is divided by 3, but let's just say that for now. We could always go in and make this better later on. So the next thing we'll do is we're going to grab the medium. All right, and again, like I told you before, like this is really just determining filter depth, I think. And we go in there. Very nice. I just like to start from 1 for whatever reason. So we'll go ahead, drag these in and release. And by default, it doesn't put it in the group. So I have to go to all zones. And I'm going to select them all and then make sure that it's selecting the M group. And that was the big reason why I did that velocity thing in advance. So let's go ahead and let's set the group to Juno bass. Now when I go into Juno bass and I select these guys, we're going to bring this velocity down to 79, and we'll bring this up to approximately 40, or maybe we'll say 35. I think that first one has way too much. Let's adjust that up to like 85. And we'll take this one. Let's go 85. And maybe we'll say 40 to 85 for this. Okay, and then we just have one more to do for this instrument. We'll grab the L's. We're going to take them. And we'll just repeat that process. Okay. So drag and drop. Again, go back to all zones. If I highlight from the bottom, I should just be grabbing the L's, which I did, which is nice. So I'm going to kind of do the velocity thing first this time. And we're going to go to 39. Just so we make sure that nothing is overlapping. I might have to double click it and put in myself. I'm struggling to get 39. All right, very good. And let's go ahead and we'll add that to the Juno bass group as well. Nothing isn't ungrouped. We're here in the Juno bass. If I hit the note really softly, hit a little harder, then I hit really hard. All right, we have that like so. And again, I don't really want this to be too extreme, especially for what I'm going to show you in a little bit when I'm going to allow it so that we can just trigger low velocities and things like that. Okay, so now we need to create a new group, and that new group is going to be the Juno lead. Now, what happened in this instance was there was a little bit of a mistake that was made. Unfortunately, I'm actually going to go to ungroup for a second. And that was that they went 2 to 50. Now off screen, I already went in and I checked it. And yeah, 2 is actually that C. So don't let that confuse you. So let's go with the H first. And let's go 2 up to 50. But again, that 2 is C. Okay, so let's grab those guys. Let's drag them and bring them in. And we are going to, again, repeat that process. So I think we said 85. And I actually don't want to show you how we're going to be able to solo this one and listen to it just yet. So I don't want to confuse you guys. But if I do hit really hard, we're going to hear 2 sounds. So they are overlapping for right now, which is okay. I'm not worried about that, but I do need to go in there a little bit later and make sure we get this right. So let me just check and make sure that all is good here. That we are starting in the right place. Okay, nice. Good, 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 good. Okay, everything's nice. We're gonna go into ungrouped, and now let's go ahead and send these to the Juno lead. Let's now grab the M and repeat, and I can probably speed through this. Okay, so now that we've brought them all in, What we need to do is we need to separate these out so that we could basically select these different groups. And there's a variety of ways to do it. The way I'm going to do it is using the select. So you see we have this select tool here. We're going to basically go through different ones by using buttons, okay? So we're gonna choose our preset based on the buttons, or we're gonna choose our sample group. So under Juno bass, I wanna make sure that I select every single thing. Okay, that should be all of our samples there, hopefully. Let's make sure, let's go into velocity range. Yep, looks like I grabbed everything, 147 zones. Let me just double check that, very good. And now under select, I'm gonna choose 0 to 10. Okay. 0 to 10, like so. Really, the range you make here doesn't matter, just as long as you have 3 different ranges. All right, Juno, and we're not doing any overlapping in this example. We could easily set something up to do that if we wanted to, but in this case, we're not going to. We're gonna choose our Juno lead next. We're gonna grab everything, and then under select, we are going to choose 11 to 20. Okay, and again, it's totally up to you how you wanna do this. And then under Juno chord, we are going to select 21 to 30. Okay, and this is just my method of doing it. Alrighty. So right now with the select all the way down at 0, we should just be hearing the Juno bass. Okay, so we can hear those different ranges. Now, when we move the select up into something over 10, we should now be hearing the lead. And then if we go up into over 20, we're hearing that chord. And that's sounding a lot quieter, so I'm thinking we should maybe grab all of those guys and bring the gain up a little bit. Some of that has to do with the velocity sensitivity as well. Okay, very cool. So now what we want to do is we want to create something from the macro page that's going to allow us to just go through these different presets. So essentially what I'm going to do is just add 3 buttons. And we're going to add button 1, button 2, and let me get button 3. Very nice. So now with this button, I'm just going to have it actually selecting this range here. So I'm just going to basically have it go to that position. Doesn't really matter. And that should keep it onto the first preset. So that's going to be our Juno bass. So when we want the bass, we select it. Now this is where it gets a little bit interesting because like it can only go to 1 point at a time. So really whatever the last button you click is really the indicator. The next one's going to be the lead. So I need to set that so that it goes to something up a little higher. This is not a foolproof method, by the way, unfortunately. I'll show you why it's not a foolproof method, but Juno lead. Okay, so we'll select that. Oop, I made the range too far. So let's take that and bring it down. Very good. And then let's go to the last one, and that's going to be our Juno chord. And again, they're using math and stuff. There's a way to set this up so that we don't have an issue. But I'm going to now select that, and we're just going to bring that up into the 0.2 range. Very nice. Oh, and I messed it up. This is supposed to say Juno chord. I had the wrong one selected. Juno chord. All right, this one's supposed to be Juno lead. Now, what's the issue is that if I click multiple ones of these, so if I click the bass and I also click the lead, it adds them on top of each other. So we could do something to correct that, but to be totally honest with you, I'm hoping that people just click one and then click off the other one. I'm hoping somebody would figure that out. And since I made it for myself, I would know, like, okay, I want to go to the lead. I want to go to the chord. And now the last thing we're going to do is another kind of like workaround, and that is going to be using velocities. So I'm just going to show you the way I would do it. Again, there are other ways to do things. There's better ways to do it. My math is so bad that like I kind of have to work this way, otherwise it doesn't work. So I want to just get the low here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this over, and let's use the bass for our example. Now, when I slam the key, I want it to be so that I'm only hearing that low, and that's what it's actually doing with the settings like that. So I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to add a couple more buttons. I know, crazy. I love the buttons. And this one is going to be called low V. This one's going to be called mid V. And the last one's going to be high V. And when they're all turned off, hopefully we're only triggering the one. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up like so. So now when I click this, it turns that on, it triggers it. When I turn it off, I'm able to hit all of them. Now, again, this is not a foolproof method because like I'm not paying that close attention to where these ranges really are. I just want to make sure that's not triggering anything else. So now I'm barely touching the key. We're getting to that next range. And we got to bring these up together. And that should be fine. So now anything I hit is getting the middle run, okay? And again, I'm not saying that this is the best way. I know people are going to write in the comments like, what are you doing, you idiot? There's a much better way to do this. And then we're going to create one more. And this one's going to be for the high velocity range. And this really, the reason I'm doing this is it allows us to just trigger the one if we want to, if we don't want those different ranges. Okay. So that should be good. And this is kind of unique to my MIDI keyboard as well, because mine is not the greatest. It's like very difficult to trigger something low. Okay, cool. So we could actually turn multiple zones on here. So we could turn on low and mid, but it's going to add them together, I guess. Wait a minute, something's wrong. Okay, that's working. Middle. Ah, there's our issue. It turned both of those on. See, this is why it's great to do this in real time. Odd. Okay, so what is this one? Okay, hang on a second, everybody. I duplicated them, so that was my problem. So we want to turn off the low one. And on this one, we turn to low. And we need to turn off the medium. Okay, so hopefully now it's working properly. Let's see how this works. No, I guess it is always going to isolate them. So I apologize. That's not true what I said before. But whatever. This is more or less the way that I would do it. If none of them are on, then yes, we can get to all of the ranges. But if we want to isolate Juno, lead, middle velocity, and then if we were working with the bass, let's say we're working with the Juno bass, middle. In this case, I then might want to go in and for the whole instrument, because again, I have to do this for the whole instrument, I could then go in and say, okay, we're going to use the mono voicing. Like so. Anyway, I hope that's been helpful for you guys. This is the way that I would go about doing this. I'm not saying it's perfect or anything like that. And again, if you want to save this then as a multi-sample, we would go in here and we would save this as, I'm just going to call it Juno patches, okay? And then that would be something I could share with users. And under this, is there something called like synthetic or anything? Synth would make sense. And okay. Alrighty, so hopefully that was useful for you guys. In the next video, we're going to look at one more example on how you can easily sort through some samples or organize samples.